Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Dr. Christine Silverstein. Of course, we've been here before. I will introduce her briefly again, and then we'll start with the topic for today's conversation. So, Dr. Christine Silverstein is a peak performance coach, founder of the Summit Center of Ideal Performance. She's a behavioral health registered nurse and clinical hypnosis expert. Dr. Christine is also a researcher. She's a historian and best-selling author of Wrestling Through Adversity, empowering children, teens, and young adults to win in life. So this is my brief introduction. The full bio will be at the end of this video. But for now, actually, I want to mention something else. So the topic for today's conversation is holism. So holism in healthcare today, mind-body split challenges the joy of being well. Mm-hmm. So this is also the theme of Christine's book, Chapter 3, Realizing the Whole Self. Mm-hmm. Yes. What an interesting topic. So, but before we dive into it, Christine, what inspired you to do what you're doing today, for those who don't know?
Well, the inspiration for my book that I started on March 1st, 2022, was looking at what was going on in the world with children, and just sitting by and saying, oh my gosh, we're not supporting our children. We're not giving children, teens or young adults, the ability to know what to do to help themselves, or coping strategies. And then we're also not having any facility to help them, like if they have a mental health issue. And I know I had been working by that time for 27 years with children, teens, and young adults. And there are many things you can teach them, and they can get through adversity, because the more they have adversity, the more resilient they become. And then on top of that, they're able to handle any situation as they grow, providing you have parents or a coach or even a guardian helping you to learn what you have to do. You don't need a GED. You don't even need a high school education. You just need to have the ability to stay with that person, to care, and you have some longevity, and you can help your children to grow and to become resilient so that they can handle these things happening in the world. So that was the motivation for my book. But as we were speaking about before, I think I've always been caring about other people and understanding positive things about them and the negative, and trying to say that there's something we can do. We can look at it another way rather than just the negative. And I used to say that to my friends too. They used to come to me and say, well, how should I look at this situation, with my boyfriend or something? Yeah. And so I think that from a very young age, but also the way my parents raised me to be independent and to look at different things and to always remember where I came from and who I am, and people say, well, it's hard to live these days in the economy. And I think back to my parents, who my father, neither one of my parents had a college education. My father worked 2 jobs all the time. He was a postal worker in the daytime, and he was the director of the PAL, the Police Athletic League Center for Sports. After that, he worked from 5 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And my mother was a waitress, and we had 5 children in the family. So I always remember what that was like and how we got through. And we never felt that we didn't have money. We thought we were wealthy, compared to some other families. And we never questioned money. But my father was hardworking, and I remember him in the kitchen doing the income tax in April and announcing, oh, this year we did well. We can buy some Easter clothing for the children, because he got some money back from the government. So I always remember that, and I'm grateful for the way they raised me.
Yeah, that's beautiful, though. Mm-hmm. You see, in a way, everything in life, it's perspective, perception, right? The way we deal with situations, the way we see them first. A question came to mind. What would be the opposite of resilience, Christine, from your perspective?
Well, the opposite would be you're not able to bounce back from anything. you're devastated by something, even like a diagnosis, you have cancer, or you fail. It's your first year of college and you failed miserably at the end of the second semester, and then you give up on yourself and you don't believe in yourself and you're just not able to make it through. And it might be that you'll never make it through in life because things pile up, adversities pile up. They're never going to be without that. And so you have to grow from adversity. And if you're not willing to do it, you won't be able to handle it later on in life when you're not so protected, by your parents, and you're out in the world and things happen, like wars and poverty and all these things. So to learn it early and then to incorporate it into who you are as a person. And so that would be the opposite. And many people say today that parents are too liberal. They're solving the problems of their children, which was the opposite when I grew up. You have to fend for yourself, right? And so they never learn, and they're too protected. You're bullied at school, so what do? You learn how to counter that with what you say and what you do. And I've worked with children who were bullied at school, and I taught them what to do, and they thrived.
Wow. Yeah, you see, that really resonates. The idea of feeling stuck, isn't it? When you talk about not bouncing back, it's just feeling as if there's nothing we can do about a situation.
There's nothing we can do. It's beyond us. And matter of fact, I don't know what to do. That's the other part of it. I never learned what to do. It's like asking somebody to do calculus, but they never learned. They didn't take math in high school, but now they're supposed to learn calculus and just know it without, studying it.
Right. That's beautiful to know too. I know this is one of the main messages in your book, resilience for teenagers. It's really a message for all of us.
Yes.
Even some of us who have not learned to be resilient in our adulthood. So I love the way you said that. So the let's say what happens when we become more resilient is that we grow, and then would you add wisdom after that?
Oh yes, of course. Yes, wisdom, and that comes maybe later on in life, where you develop it because you look back in your life and you know a lot of things, but that's because you've learned. That's not just given to you; that's earned, and I really believe that in my life. As an older person, a more mature person, I have a lot of wisdom, but we seem to forget that sometimes with mature people. That wisdom's important, but that plus intuition, those two things are very important to combine.
I love that you added that too. Right. So wisdom, the way I define wisdom is applied knowledge, lived knowledge.
Yes.
Applied and lived. And then I love that you added intuition. So would you say that intuition is it's a type of knowledge, of wisdom, but it's not really necessarily from experience, right?
Well, I think intuition, you build on it. You might, as we were talking about before, you build on it in the sense that, you learn remember that experience when I listened. Remember that experience when I didn't listen. Like I was talking about the paint can, you didn't listen. And so then you begin to trust it more over the course of your life. And you may have had that intuition when you were a child, but you just didn't know what it was. You just felt, you were lost, and then you found your way home from school, but you were lost at first or something like that. So you didn't think of it as intuition. But later on, there's a word attached to it.
Yes, that also resonates true to me. So that has to do with trusting our inner voice and that innate wisdom that we all have, natural wisdom we all have, which it tends to be universal, right, Christine? It usually is. It's always universal. It's never, in a way, not personal.
Yes, but intuition too could come from your mother always told you such and such. And then you say, oh, I should have listened to my mother. When you get older, my mother was very wise. I should have listened to her, So that's kind of an intuition that you get from your mom or your dad, like that. And so it's passed on.
Oh, I never thought it that way, Christine. So it's something that, right, I related that to again, knowledge and wisdom, but I didn't think about intuition being something that could be passed on to others. Because
Mm-hmm.
we talked off record for a moment about freshness, the freshness of being, of
Yes.
thinking. So when I think about intuition, I think about something fresh, something universal, something that's
Mm-hmm.
beyond really the body mind realms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, it goes back to the topic of today's conversation. It's whole. It feels whole.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that relates to that idea of intuition being passed on. I never thought it that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's fresh too for today's
Yes, in a
conversation.
sense. So that's how I see it. What my mom would tell me, and she was very poetic, and she loved
Ah,
poetry, and she taught me
yeah,
about that too. What does this mean, Mom? When I had an assignment at school, we'd all go to my mother to interpret the poetry, and when I was younger, and
yes.
she'd tell us what it meant. It was innate within her, and I turned out to be a poet as well.
Yes. So that might relate to the idea of timeless wisdom, timeless knowledge. It's something that everyone relates to it in a way. It's
Hmm.
so not just logic, but yeah, it is logical. And at the same time, it is intuitive, it is spiritual. It kind of brings all that.
Yes, it's you can look at it in a very broad way. It's because remember these are abstract concepts,
Right. Yes.
especially intuition. Intuition is abstract.
It is, yeah, and it feels that way because we're not able to. It's very subtle. We're not able
Hmm.
to pin down where it's coming from and from who, what, and how to distinguish, that voice from belief systems and from societal expectations and etc. So it's really not an easy ground to navigate. But speaking of concepts, holism, being holistic, how do you define that with your own? Do you have your own words to define the idea of holism?
Yes, well, we think about the word holistic. It's used today quite often. It's like holistic nursing, as
Yeah.
if nursing was never holistic before. It was holistic from its very roots, from Florence Nightingale. But we hear that word holistic and we wonder what that means, and we can apply it. You know, um,
Yeah.
the counselor might apply it, or even when you're in the beauty salon, they'll be holistic and give you a massage for the shoulders like that.
Yeah.
But what it really means, it's a term, a concept that's characterized by this belief that the parts of something are interconnected,
Mm,
and you can't really explain it except by referencing it with the whole. The whole is equal to the sum of its parts. So in medicine, it might be you have holistic treatment that is really treating
yeah.
the whole person, like we were talking about mind, body, spirit. And of course, as I said, the fourth dimension of that is emotion. So we need to work with emotion, especially when we're working with the mind.
Yes. And
Hmm.
we did talk briefly about this, and I mentioned my perspective on the spirit, the whole spirit. It's
Hmm.
holism to me has to do with
Hmm.
acknowledging that we are spirit
Hmm.
beings, or
Hmm.
we the substance that sustains this
Hmm.
reality is a spiritual one. Does it make sense to you when I say that, Christine? I'm just wondering because that's my understanding, especially these days. I've been contemplating this idea of, I mean, for years, of course, I've been doing this, but lately, more so lately for some reason, there's the perspective or perception of coming from I am already whole in the sense of spirit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Everything
Hmm.
that is happening, they are just experiences of body, mind, and emotions, as you say.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I always go back to the wholeness of it, and,
Hmm.
that's this the spirit piece
Hmm.
always.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that
Well,
resonates
I
with
do
you.
believe that we're spirit, and then we come to this earth, and we're humans.
Yeah,
I mean, talking about Neanderthals or whatever we are on this earth, and then we return in
yeah.
spirit. So we're spirit to begin with, before we're born. That's what I always believe. And I always relate it to spirit, something other than humans, or even spirit through the saints, or spirit through the
Yeah.
angels. So it was never just I'm a human being. And I always believed in prayer, and I learned that at an early age, and also that God was everywhere, and
Yeah. Mm.
protecting us, guiding us. So that was part of my education at an early age. I went to Catholic school at 5 years old, and I learned these things in a very basic level. And as I said, I explored it much more growing up, and now I have my own idea about spirit and what it is and who I am. But the basic elements were given to me in Catholic school, and also the fact that my name is Christine, and my mother
Yeah.
named me that purposely because she converted to Catholicism when she was about 10, and she knew that name meant follower of Christ. So she gave that name to me, and she never told me that until she was older, why she called me Christine.
Yeah. I'm always so, it's not really an attraction. It feels like a calling. It feels like a longing to just
Mm-hmm,
be at this place that you call whole. See, holism, whole. What is it? It feels like, if I could express in words, if I can put words to it, it feels like I am what I'm looking for. There's nothing missing. There's nothing
mm-hmm,
that can be added here. I'm already,
mm-hmm,
I'm already there.
mm-hmm,
But then, there's the body mind experiences that they feel like there's always something happening that
mm-hmm,
makes us believe that we are not whole, that
mm-hmm.
we are broken, that there's something to be fixed, there's somewhere to
Yes.
go, right? That
Mm-hmm,
we're not happy enough or
mm-hmm.
healed enough.
Well, that's the whole medical model that's focused on illness. It's not focused on wellness. And
Right.
that's where it comes into play that there's more than that the patient is a person, right?
Right.
As I described. And also that it's not just a physical challenge. And if you even think about releasing weight, like you weigh 400 pounds and you want to weigh less, there's emotion involved in that, and you have to look at emotion, not just the fact that you're going to be on this diet, which the word diet has the word die in it, so it's very negative.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, you see ads on TV with somebody injecting, a medication because they want to be thinner, and they don't realize that there's emotional eating, and
Mm.
you need to look at, and also the experience of being obese, grossly obese, like 400 pounds, that comes with trauma too. So you can't just look at the physical body and just give yourself these injections and
Right.
think that's the only way to go.
Right. Exactly. Oh my God, that's so much truth. And I can relate to it again from an experiential perspective. When I was a professional personal trainer, I
Mm-hmm,
remember that my clients, they're so focused on looking good and feeling
mm-hmm,
good at the level, the physical level. But it was
mm-hmm,
clear to me that, including myself at the time, that we needed more, not just to
mm-hmm,
look good and fit and strong physically, but we needed at the level of the mind and, and realize the spirit that
mm-hmm,
we are
mm-hmm.
whole already. So that was my realization. That related that with you when you participated in that workshop in PA, I believe, in Pennsylvania,
Yes.
where
Mm-hmm.
somebody talked to you about, oh, what are you doing here? There's nobody sick here.
Right. It was a workshop for wrestling coaches, right? And
Yeah.
so I took this trip and thinking, okay, I'm being called to do this. I was invited, and I arrived there in Pennsylvania after driving several hours, and there are all these males, and they're looking at me and saying, "What are you
Mm.
doing here? You're a nurse, and we're not injured," saying to me. But also they said, "Well, aren't you a psychologist?" I said, "No, I'm a nurse and I
Yeah.
work with as peak performance coach."
Mm.
And then we got past that, and they were asking questions like, because we were working with teenagers, they coach teenagers, and saying, "Oh, well, aren't we born negative and the parents have to make them positive?" And I said, "No, it's the other way around." And they were surprised. I said, "Children are born without the judgment like they have when they grow up.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
the other way around." So they questioned that, but it brought me back to the history of nursing, when there was bodily nursing. Literally, they called it bodily nurses, and they worked in the general hospital. And then there were the mental nurses who worked in the mental institution. So that's the body-mind split that we're talking about right there.
Yeah.
Was prevalent before 1895, when Freud started to talk about it, and these other people like Adolf Meyer started to talk about, well, there's a mind beyond the physical body. And so before that, nobody thought about it that way. It's a fairly new concept, in the development of mankind, to start understanding that. But it was towards the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century when we started to delve into these concepts. Because how did
Right.
we know? We didn't have the beyond X-rays. We didn't have MRIs, and we didn't have testing and PET scans like that. And they're just now beginning to look at the anatomy of the brain and how it works, and find out concepts that people thought about, like Freud and Adolf Meyer, who believed in neuroplasticity, but we really didn't find out what that was, or that it was a real thing, until around 2000. So we're talking almost 100 years.
Yeah, that's unbelievable how long it takes for us to let go of some belief systems, some models, right, that we
Mm-hmm.
have been holding on to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it is too. It's almost like there's a structure that has been
Yes.
created that most people in societies, they have a hard time demolishing, kind of bringing down these structures, because they're already built, they have been there for so long that they resist to learn something new. But in a way, the only way we can replace a belief system or an old system, it would be really to that's destroying the old one. But hopefully that's not needed, right, Christine? And we can
Right.
integrate somehow in a more gentle way.
Well, they used to believe, when air flight was used for the general population, that going on a plane would loosen your teeth.
Yes.
Your teeth would fall out.
Right.
And that probably was because people were so fearful, they were gritting their teeth, and maybe they got some loose teeth there. But that was a
Right.
belief. And then everybody said, oh yeah, your teeth might fall out if you go on a plane flight.
Right. Again, I'm a student of Vedanta, so because of that, I have been really
Mm-hmm.
doing a lot of work on the understanding of this reality as non-dual. So there's no really two realities, but one. As you
Mm-hmm.
go back to the beautiful
Mm-hmm.
topic of the whole self, wholeness. So
Mm-hmm.
there's one reality only. So how can we just get to that understanding and accept that? It seems like most of us don't accept the idea. I see scientists, they cannot accept the idea that we exist beyond the body, mind, and emotions. They talk a lot about evidence, but
Mm-hmm.
I think they need to be open too. That's something. It seems
Mm-hmm.
like they are believing something. They are not different from spiritual teachers or spiritual ideas in that sense. It's very
Mm-hmm.
abstract in that sense.
Well, I think what you're talking about is the idea that there's a physical system, and then there's what Mandler, a writer who wrote about the the mind body spirit dichotomy, and
Right.
he said there's a physical system, and that physical system, you can check it out. You can X-ray the bone that's broken, and you can have the result and the evidence. And then there's the mental system, he called it. He wrote his book in 1985, I believe it was. And so he's saying, well, how can the physical system have feeling? He said that's
Mm,
what the problem is. He said this is a problem that we're looking at, but how can the physical system have feeling? And then he said, it's the way we're talking about it. He believed that in the future we'd have both combined, the physical system and the mental system, because he said that we just didn't have the terminology or the things to put in the theories, and we just talked about it in everyday language, like can how can something that's a physical system have a feeling?
mm,
So he said, in the
Mm.
future, we'll
Yeah.
find out. And we're finding out more now because we're learning about the brain and have much research on it and very advanced research. And we're finding out that they're all connected. It's just that we believe that they're separate. And the doctor said, I have this or have that. But there are such things as psychogenic epilepsy or fundamental neurological disorder, they call it. And that has to do with the psychiatrist I was telling you about, the resident who who is in his residency, and he has this idea. He's learning things in his psychiatry courses about the mind. And he said, well, I work with PTSD and trauma and I help people, and that's my major work. But then what do I do when my patient is sitting there and moving uncontrollably, like he's
Yeah.
having a seizure? But the seizure is psychogenic, right? It's psychogenic. So then he says he's frustrated by this because he doesn't know what to do, and he only takes maybe one or two neurology courses in his program. So he thinks, well, maybe I should learn more about neurology. But he's looking at his work with the mind that's in the head. And then he says in this interview, in this YouTube video, that below the neck is neurology, right? So he's
Mm.
separating
Yeah.
in just in that case, he's separating the mind and the body in that sense. This is in the 21st century, a recent video. And then he's saying, so then I have to go to the neurologist, right, to find out. I should take more neurology courses. And the neurology students are saying, oh, I only take one or two psychiatry courses. And so we could use all the help we can get. But I know that there are the cranial nerves that are in the skull, in the brain, and they, of course, relate to the whole body and not just to the mind. There are physical cranial nerves, like the vagus nerve that's in the brain, and theoretically, this psychiatry resident is not accurate, but that's his belief, that there's the split. There's the mind that I work with and the trauma and the PTSD, and I
Mm.
don't know what to do when my patient who has this psychogenic epilepsy or some kind of fundamental neurological disorder, that it should be left to the neurologist. Now, I've worked with people like this who have had, and it's called, one of them is called, and now it's called, it used to be hysteria, and
Oh
now
yeah.
it's not called hysteria. It's a disorder, right? So they're thinking, well, what do you do? And I've worked with people who have, I'm working with the mind with hypnosis, but they also start shaking like that,
Yeah.
So I work with them to condition them to set themselves up to know what to do. So at times, all I need to do is I'm using hypnosis, and I just touch them on the shoulder and I say, you're still.
Yeah.
And the so-called seizure stops automatically like that. But of course, I know that this person has been to a physician, and that is psychogenic in nature. And that's what the patient has been told. So of course, if they start shaking, and having a seizure, and they didn't go to the doctor, of course, I would tell them, you have to go to the neurologist, that this is happening. But in this case, the client that I'm talking about, she might just all of a sudden start shaking like that, but I can calm her down very easily. So that's what I suggest to this psychiatrist who's a resident,
Yeah.
because it's not true. They're connected. The cranial nerves are connected to the rest of the body, and also the vagus nerve is a very important role in the body. And also, you can connect it by what you say and what you do, and then you have the backup of the neurologist who's checking everything out, giving you EEGs and things like that, that can really discern whether you have epilepsy or you have psychogenic epilepsy that's caused by thoughts and feelings.
Right. Right. Wow. You see, you use the word believe as a belief system, like believe in something. That's, in science is a field that we know is evidence based.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
there's no room for belief systems, right? To
Hmm.
believe in something. But it
Yes.
seems that there's a lot of belief systems there too.
Oh, yes. Of course, they believe, and they believe
Mm,
they're right because they have the evidence. Now, the evidence can be fudged a little bit,
right.
and we see that with pharmaceutical companies, that just look at, well, here, take this drug, and we don't have to tell you what the side effects are, and maybe we can fix that. Maybe they're permanent, like tardive dyskinesia, TD. Maybe it will go away, maybe it won't, and maybe this drug we're giving you might cause
Right.
more abnormal movements, which counters the supposed effect of it. So it's very interesting. You
Huh.
can, figures never lie, but liars can always figure. That's what I say.
Ah, that's interesting. Right. And expand on that, right? On that
Hmm.
untruth kind of findings. Yeah. It might be also related to fear, based on fear too. Like I mentioned, the structures. Once, we
Hmm.
as humans, we have a hard time
Hmm.
kind of recognizing that we have done that, we don't have the complete truth, that we don't know everything. So I think there's shame behind that too. So they tend to hold down to what they know, and move forward with something that might not be working, as we already see in the medical system, healthcare system, treating the person, as you've been saying, as
Hmm.
this, only body, only mind.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
doesn't work. It has not been working.
And that we're actually persons. We're not a diagnosis. We're
Mm,
not just a physical body. And we're not a room number, like patient in room number such and such. We're actually human beings, and we have different needs and different perceptions, and
yes.
things can change depending on the way you talk to people. And so there are lots of stories about that, like the patient. I read once about a patient who had a heart condition. It was really, he was, as far as the physician said, he was at the end of his life, and
Right.
he was in the bed, and the head physician was talking to the residents or the interns and saying, "Look at him; his heart is racing." And in other words, there's no hope for this man. But they sent him home, because he used the word gallop, right? His heart is galloping.
Yeah.
So they sent him home, and he came back some months later for a checkup, and his heart had improved. So the doctor was so surprised, because he thought he was a goner. He was going to die soon. So he said, "What did you do?" He said, "Well, I listened to you, doctor. You talked about my heart galloping, and so I made myself into a racehorse. I imagined I was a racehorse." And that's how he healed. He was galloping.
That's interesting too. Yeah, you see, there's space, that room for not just imagination, but the intuitive. You mentioned that earlier,
Hmm.
and I know you didn't talk about Gabriella, how you asked her for guidance. That's the
Hmm.
intuitive part of it. I connect that to the spirit.
Yes. Yes. So Gabriella is an angel that's near my fireplace where I
Yeah.
meditate. And I explained to you that I was writing the speaking points, to send to you. And I had
Right.
just finished it, and I decided I'm going to meditate and see if there's anything else I have to add. And when I opened my eyes, my phone, my phone rang, and there was a message on there about this a
Mm,
psychiatrist in the mind body split that he was talking about. I said, "Oh my goodness, this is evidence for today." So I felt that I was guided, and that somehow it ended up on the phone when I looked at the message. It was something that was listed there, and so that's very incredible to me, that showing me that I'm guided to see
mm,
things. And as
mm,
a historian, I know that's very true, of what I should look at and what I should focus on, and even get the spirit of a book that might move off the shelf when I'm looking at in the library,
mm,
or asking Florence Nightingale, when I did research at the British Library, with her thousands and thousands of letters that she wrote, one of the largest archives in the world. And I wanted something to know about interpersonal relations, and how to talk to people, and people were telling me that Florence Nightingale, she was just an administrator and she was mean and she was this and that. And that was not true, because I was able to access the letters that she wrote to the soldiers during the Crimean War, even though she had Crimean fever herself and she was very ill. And the stories that she told to the family members, oh, this, not to be alarmed, your son died in the hands of a nurse, he took care of his personal needs, and this is what he said about you. And she wrote these letters home, and I'm sitting in this British library where the Magna Carta is, and I'm bawling my eyes out reading these letters that Florence Nightingale sent, because they were the actual letters. And so, yes, nursing is holistic. It always has been since Florence Nightingale. I can vouch for that. That's one of the things I was investigating when I went there. Very big privilege for me to read her notes and her statistics that proved that nurses had value. And that was the beginning of nursing.
Yes. I really think that the fundamental issue per se, which to me it is a problem, as we can see in this reality, is the belief that we are only the body, mind, and emotions. I could add. So I think that's very limited, and by limiting ourselves, then it doesn't leave a lot of room for the unlimited, the infinite. This the beauty of big pictures. So that's left for the artists and for the spiritual people. But we know that everyone could have access to that. And we are, because we are part of that, the whole body, that absolute reality, which I call it the spirit. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, Christine, but I do think that it's belief systems. We just believe in that we are the body, mind, emotion only. That's really the root of all issues that we might have here in this reality that I call ignorance.
Yes, well, we have to understand also that spirituality isn't just religion.
Right.
We tend to think that it's religion. This is what I believe. This is what I was taught. And as I told you, I started at Catholic school at 5 years old. And so I thought that Jesus was in the light fixture above me, because I couldn't see the altar.
Yes.
The priest said, God is light. And I'm praying to the light fixture above me, because I was in the back of the church and the taller
Right.
people were in front of me. So I learned that it's everywhere, and it's in nature, it's in the trees, and that we're all connected through our DNA. And that has been proven. And I recently went to a beautiful exhibit at the Museum of Natural History in New York City, and it talked about how we're connected to the plants and to the bugs and the bees and all this through our DNA. And it was an immersion experience where we went into this room and the lights were above us, and it was just a beautiful experience. And you came out feeling that everything's connected. I've always been connected to the trees, connected to the ocean. I used to wake up when I was a mother of small children and feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm here with the laundry. I had 4 children, the laundry up to my hips, on Monday morning, and thinking, what am I doing here? I must have another purpose, right? Talk about forgetting who you are. And then I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and my husband would wake up too, because I'd sit up and say, the ocean's calling me, and my husband say, what? How could the ocean be calling? Why don't you go to sleep and tell me tomorrow? I have to get up for work tomorrow. But I've always been connected like that. And I don't know, I must have been dreaming about being connected to the ocean, because I grew up near the ocean. And so I know, I understand it in a different level than somebody who didn't visit the ocean many times. I saw life and death there. I saw many things at the ocean growing up. Like somebody drowning, for instance. I witnessed that when I was a small child.
So you're just exploring, investigating all parts of being, and not really going one way. I know that's not easy to do, right, Christine? Because the structures and the way society operates, all these outdated systems in place, we can't really. There's just too much value being given to rational, let's say, expressions of being. If we don't make sense, then we must be let's say somebody who is out there in a spiritual, I don't know, with their spiritual understandings, or they have lost their minds, or
Mm-hmm.
and that creates a lot of problems too, because then judgment sets in, and as you know, ignorance will create a lot of suffering from that place of not
Yes,
knowing, right?
definitely. And if you look at the work of Adolf Meyer, Dr. Adolf Meyer that I spoke about, he was
Yeah.
at the Henry Phipps Clinic in Johns Hopkins, and he believed, and this is very early on in the mental hygiene movement,
Oh yeah.
connecting with Clifford
Yeah.
Beers, who was the person who wrote The Mind That Found Himself. He had been in seclusion, and he's a Yale graduate, and all the horrible things I know because I printed out his book
Yeah.
and read it. So I know all the horrible things that happened to him there. So he started the mental hygiene movement in 1908, but then Dr. Adolf Meyer joined in with him. So they were the co-creators, and they believed in psychobiology and that there was connection between the mind and body, and that the patient was a person. And this is way back in 1910. And
Right.
so they were saying, oh, you can go in and you can rehearse on the hospital unit. You could mentally, what I call mental rehearsal today when I work with my clients, you could rehearse the scenarios in your life, and you can improve upon them. And of course, it was beyond the technical aspects of examining the patient in the morgue, or the organic disease. He said you have to talk to people. Psychiatrists should be talking to people,
Yeah.
and not just looking at the lab results. So, but he was put aside. Although up to 1950, he had his clinic. He died, I think, in 1950. But he was put down by people because his concepts, even of schizophrenia, that it's just maladaptive life in the community, and that you can fix it. He really believed that, but it went against the principles of the mind body split. And so then the physicians would have to give that up. And that was based on real science and evidence. So
Mm.
they couldn't give it up because psychiatry wanted to build up their experiments to show that they were real doctors, because that's how a doctor was evaluated. They were the low men on the totem pole. And I say men because a lot of them were men, early on. So that the idea that well, you can't do away with that concept because this is real research, and that was
Yeah.
part of the reason why we had the decade of the brain, talking about the origin of mental disorders, and that was in the 1990s. So we're talking all the way up almost to the 21st century, where where mental illness comes from the brain, the regions of the brain that you can explore, the maps, the neurological maps, and find out. But they found out, from the research, that things like schizophrenia didn't occur in one part of the brain. It's many
Mm.
parts of the brain. Of course, they found more information out, but they were saying that schizophrenia was something going wrong in one of the regions of the brain. But they didn't understand that what they found on the MRI or the PET scan was maybe a place that was deteriorating in the brain, but it didn't mean it was the cause. It could have been the result of having schizophrenia for many years. So they couldn't call it a causative factor, and
Right.
so they moved on from that, realizing it's not one region of the brain, and examining it more like even the World Health Organization is looking at it as maladaptation in the community, and that you need to treat these people with schizophrenia with respect, and and understand their hallucinations. And this is the World Health Organization looking
Yeah.
down on U.S. Chemical lobotomization of the brain with all these psychotropic drugs that could actually long term damage the brain, especially if there's so many of them are used at one time that they counter each other.
Right. So you see the understanding that, again, going back to fundamental understandings, like
Mm-hmm.
what is to be mentally healthy? That's a question that I often ask everyone, therapists, psychiatrists here, because I'm really curious to know, how did they find that? How do they look at,
Mm-hmm.
if they look at life as a whole, or they are just
Mm-hmm.
looking for parts of it?
They're not looking at the whole. And I'll
Ah,
tell you, because I know the history of the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM. I studied that along with all my research on psychiatric nursing and psychiatry as a historian. And so they had this DSM. The very first one was very narrow. Now it's much bigger volume. And they had, one of the reasons
Yeah.
why they started it was because when psychiatrists, they went to court, right, talking about their patient, whether he's, insane or not insane. The psychiatrist in one courtroom would say one thing about a diagnosis, and somebody else would say another thing, because there wasn't any connection. There wasn't anything written down. So that was one of the reasons why they created the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Another reason was they wanted to do more research, like the neurologists wanted to do more research. And so they need to have a basis to work with for research. And another reason, of course, is that's a way for psychologists and psychiatrists to get paid for their services by putting in this book, and then to say this person has such and such that I can treat and for which I will get paid.
Right.
Now, that still
Right.
exists today, and that's one of the drawbacks of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And we know that. And then I was reading something recently, because years ago in one of the first DSMs, they had homosexuality in the book as a mental disorder, and now they have changed their concepts, because now gender identity is a big topic today. So I recently read that, it's in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, but it's not really a mental disorder, but we'll put it in there anyway so people can get paid, So
Wow.
that's literally, what I recently read. So even though they're not calling it that, people need to get paid. So those are the three major reasons why they created that manual, that says if you have certain symptoms or a syndrome, then you must have this disorder. If you have it for a length of time, say 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever they apply to it, then you must have it. And that is a criticism of other countries and the World Health Organization. That's what they're saying. We're too reliant on these psychotropic drugs. And, it has to do with people in the community, and everybody's a human being, and you shouldn't be stigmatized, and you shouldn't be mistreated because you're in that book. That's your diagnosis, and if you want to believe it, you can. But also, we have to note that there was a major study in 2022 that really debunked the idea that depression has to do with serotonin. And so it was a big upheaval in the community for people who were prescribing all these drugs, and then for the people who had been given them and now they can't get off them. And it's really challenging. So it's a way of looking at things. It's like Adolf Meyer said, it's a way of adapting to live in the community, and he called it social adaptation.
God, yeah, that would make sense to me. So because a lot of these so-called mental problems, psychological problems, are coming from not adapting to the environment, right? Especially our modern environment. What is your vision for that, Christine?
Well, I think that as we were talking about earlier, we have to know ourselves, and we have to know that we can do things as parents. For instance, we can actually help our children overcome the challenges of epigenetic DNA changes that are reversible by positive parenting. That's where the hope is, that parents understand themselves first, or the guardians, or whoever, even a coach who's caring for their student athlete, that you have to understand yourself first, and then you need to work with yourself, your traumas, release them, and then learn what to do to teach your children the same things. And this is how you teach empathy. You learn that through your parents.
Yeah.
And he was a psychoanalyst and a psychiatrist. His name was Dr. Stanley Greenspan, and he wrote he wrote his book in, I think it was 1997, and he has since passed on. But he was this great doctor. I love his book. I almost like slept with it when I was writing my book because it had
Yeah.
such important information in it. And he said that mental health, it can be determined in different ways beyond this diagnosis and this manual. He said somebody who has gone, he gave two examples. One was, her name was, I think, Sylvia, and how she had all these challenges. And when she was a child, there were many children. Her parents died when she was young, and she took care of all her family. And she got through life, and her daughters died. But still, at the end of her life, she had empathy for other people. She
Mm.
helped people. And he's saying she's mentally healthy. So she had challenges. She was even in maybe being treated for a mental disorder at one point, but she's healthy because she's empathetic. She's getting through life and all the challenges, and she's resilient. And then he compared that with a man who he was full of himself, and he didn't really have any empathy. His wife had breast cancer, and he said, "So what? You'll get better from it." And pretty much left her. He couldn't empathize with his children in sports.
Yeah.
He couldn't speak to them. And so he said, Dr. Greenspan said, well, he is not mentally healthy because of the way he's behaving. So it's a
Mm.
different way of looking at what is it and what is not. And we have never really determined it. And that's the failure today. But it can be remedied by learning what to do. And we need to take responsibility for ourselves. Who's going to teach us this stuff? If our parents
Right.
don't, and our parents don't know it. So then that's very negative, the negative outcome. But I believe that people can learn what to do, look back in their lives, and help the children to grow and to become resilient. And then you can get through anything, no matter what the catastrophe is, and you'll bounce back. And that's a sign of mental health right there.
Wow, what a beautiful message. One that
Mm-hmm.
we have been talking about. So we have recorded two videos. It's out there. It's on my website, Fit for Joy, also YouTube. So we have been talking about this. But every time I hear it, Christine, it sounds fresh to me. In the sense
Mm-hmm.
of that's need. It's a reminder. We need to be reminded of that.
Yes, we do. And to look at it from a different perspective that we might not have,
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
two people can be standing near a car accident, and each one has a different story about it, what they saw, you know.
Right.
So we have different perceptions.
Yes. Yeah. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that being healthy, going back to this idea of health, as you quoted this other person, but I was trying to thank you. I think I was reflecting on this before coming to talk to you today. It's doing something, behaving in a way that we know it's beneficial for the whole, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There's something about health that resonates with that, knowing that everything's part of that whole. So it's like being
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the body, all taking care of all the cells and of all, I mean, doing something to this body mind complex that it kind of keeps it in balance. So to me, that
Yes.
would be the idea of health, thinking about the body mind, but then we're going with the big picture, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
behaving in a way that it's beneficial to humanity, to the
Yes.
environment, the earth, everything.
Everything around us, like in this
Yeah.
emergent experience at the Museum of Natural History. And then from there, I went to the planetarium and I saw the stars and the
Yeah.
planets. So it was a great day at the museum. But I came out of there feeling whole. I came out of there feeling connected to all the people, a lot of children in the museum on that day,
Yeah.
and also to the universe and to the stars, to everything. Just like Galileo, he said,
Huh.
man isn't the center of the earth. And that was like big news in that day, but nobody believed him, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah. You see, that's beautiful though. If see, that's the contemplation. Even though we can't do anything to be beneficial to the stars and the cosmos at large, but there's something about the gratitude, the appreciation of being able
Hmm.
to even see that, to witness this
Exactly.
amazing
Hmm.
show. It feels
Hmm.
like that. So that's coming from that place. That what it feels like. It comes from the being connected to everything.
Yes, and that's humanity, and that's empathy, that you can empathize with somebody, like somebody
Yeah.
in Gaza, somebody in Israel, somebody who lives in Iran. What are their lives like? And you
Right.
don't know because you haven't experienced it. You only know what your experience is. I found that out as a young child, and I was sleeping at my friend's house overnight, and in the morning we went into the kitchen. I had no shoes on, no slippers, and I felt the floor like gritty underneath my feet, and I was just totally shocked. I was about 10 years old, and I thought everybody cleaned the kitchen floor like my mother.
Yeah.
And I went home, and
Yeah.
my mother just laughed. And she said, no, everybody isn't as it doesn't clean every day like I do, because my father was very meticulous. But that was a
Mm.
shock to me. I'm thinking, what is this under my feet? It was like sand or something.
Yes. You
Mhm.
see, it's right. Being able to understand that we are all different. Yeah, we're all the same and different at the same time. Different in the sense of being unique and a unique expression of life itself. So
Yes,
it's
we're
just
all
unique.
unique. And that's true with the physical body. We're born with essentially the same organs. Some people
Yeah.
without certain organs, unfortunately. But there is such a thing as a person having their organs switched to the other side of the body. Instead of the heart
Mm.
here, it's on the other side, and all the organs are switched when they're born. So it's not perfect. It's the system. It was all there, but it was just switched. So if you try to listen to the heart where we have
Yeah.
our hearts, you wouldn't hear the heartbeat like that. And you'd find out soon after birth that your heart was on the other side.
Yes. Yeah. You
Mhm.
see, the way I see it is because my perception, which I'm deepening every day, I do
Hmm.
work on that, meditation, contemplation, is that everything is God, the expression of God.
Everything. Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
beautiful to honor the expression of that which it's infinite, that's timeless, unlimited, which I
Hmm.
call God these days. I'm really not really trying to use a different word. Before I
Hmm.
was a little bit shying away from the word God, but not anymore. It's the
Hmm.
most direct way I can think about.
Hmm.
Everything's an expression of God. So
Hmm.
it's honoring that. That feels
Hmm.
whole to me. It really
Hmm.
does.
Hmm.
In you, I know, Christine, in your work, it's you don't really tap into the spirituality as in the sense of speaking about it, but it's all over it.
Hmm.
Everything you're doing, it's
Yes.
just
Well,
so
it's part
spiritual to
of
me.
it. It's so much a part of it that you don't
Mm,
have to speak about it. It's
right.
just part of you. And that's how I feel. Everything comes from spirit. But
Yes.
I
Mm,
work with clients who are very religious. They have certain religious beliefs, but I can still work with an athlete and tell them, here, the spirit, which was in the design of the egg that I talked about in our
yeah.
speaking notes, and how the eggshell is the physical body, and the egg white is the mind, and the center, the yolk, is the spirit. And that's how I explained it to wrestling coaches, in 1997, and they got it. They got it. But the spirit is not necessarily religion. It's your core beliefs. It's who you are. It's what's in your heart. So all those things. So I explain it to my clients, and I call them, this is the core of you. And I say all your beliefs and all your skills are within you, and nobody can take that away from you. you
Right.
know that's yours if you want to claim it, right? So they understand it. Even the young kids and the teenagers, they understand that. So if you don't take care of your physical body, you could get injuries for sure on the wrestling mat. But also, you're not going to win a wrestling match if you just use your mind. You have to
Mm,
use your body, and you need the spirit as well. The spirit is the core of you, and kind of like the subconscious core of you, where all your wrestling skills are stored. So you better look at it. The subconscious mind to people is like, woo, way out there.
mm.
Like, and I explain, no, the subconscious mind controls your heart rate, your digestion, your breathing, and all the vital aspects of who we are to operate fully. And that's all in the subconscious, and people
Mm,
don't know that. That's a physiological aspect of the subconscious mind right there.
mm.
It's not just
Yes, right.
symbolic. It's not just
Right.
symbolic. We don't have to think about breathing. We don't have to think about our heart rate and say, oh, it's going too fast or too slow. Thank goodness. What about when we sleep? We would never get
Right.
any sleep if that's all we think about. So that's the magnificence of the physical body, but it has to do with the subconscious mind.
Yes, that's, you see, that's how, not just even connected, they are one, they're whole again. It goes back to
Mm-hmm.
that. It's so
Mm-hmm.
clear to me. And I know it's, like you said, not everyone understands this yet, but I think we are getting there. With your help, Christine, we are getting there, putting this
Thank
out
you.
there.
I'd like to think I'm making a little bit of an
Oh,
impression on
yes.
people because it's so important and it's freeing and it gives you hope as well that you have control over what you think, what you feel, what you know. And nobody can take that from you
Right.
if, unless you let them. There's something like Eleanor Roosevelt said something like that in her quote. Nobody can take that from you unless you let them.
Yes, right. You need to open the door, right, for visitors to
Mm-hmm.
come, right? So we're almost at the end. Gosh, so many notes here we didn't talk about, but I think we tapped into pretty much everything.
Yes, the essence of it and the history of it and
Yeah.
why we think that there isn't such a thing as a mind because we can't touch it. we can't
Yes.
we can't know it. On an MRI, it's not a physiological structure, an anatomical feature of your brain that we can investigate. It's something that's ethereal. It's throughout the physical body, and that comes about when you have muscle memory, like when you're playing baseball or tennis and you know how to hit the ball.
Yeah.
Right? It's just automatic if you can get in the zone.
Yes. Yeah. The zone, right? You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that, right? And so, yeah, I know you wanted to read Professor Muse. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing the name correctly. That's in your book. It's beautiful, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's about mindfulness, right, Christine? His
Yes,
work mainly.
yes. So I have this experience since a time when was having many miscarriages, and I learned transcendental meditation then. And I also learned self-hypnosis, and those two things got me through when all the doctors told me I was infertile. I was a habitual aborter because I had 4 miscarriages and I'd never
Yeah.
have a child of my own unless I took a toxic drug, DES, diethylstilbestrol. So I said, to heck with this. I came out of the doctor's office, ripped up the prescription, and I started to learn meditation and self-hypnosis, which saved
Mm,
me. So I still practice that today and to get in the zone. So this is from my book on page 75, and it talks about a professor. His name is Professor Muse. He asked, how do we imagine the relationship between the mind and body in our own lives? We're talking about this here, what
yeah.
it means to us. Professor Muse presents ideas for us on how to develop mindfulness, and he suggests the healthy practice of meditation. He tells us that we may not be able to control particular thoughts that come into our minds, but we can influence the conditioned mind that gives rise to them.
Right.
However, he cautions us that the mind must be tended to with a watchful eye to prevent unwholesome thoughts that can rob us of happiness and freedom.
Yeah.
As Shakespeare reminded us, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Christine. Is there anything else you would like to mention? I do have, I want to mention your services here too in your website. But before that, anything else that you left unsaid?
Well, I'd like to mention my book, Wrestling
Yeah.
Through Adversity, Empowering Children, Teens, and Young Adults to Win in Life, and also that it's coming out in an audiobook soon,
Yeah.
in the next month, 2 months or so. And I'm also having it translated into Arabic, and that will be coming out sometime in the near future as well, for
Yeah.
all people who speak the Arab language, and which I'm finding is quite an experience learning something about the Arab
Hmm.
language and how poetic it is from the translator. He's teaching me that
Wow.
AI isn't the way to go, to record my book. So he's using different poetic words to describe the same thing, and it's quite beautiful.
Gosh, I would love to listen to it. I just love languages. So yes, I'll
Mm-hmm.
have the book link on the podcast profile as I have for the other ones. And I want to mention your services too. So that's in your website,
Mm-hmm.
idealperformance.net. And I'll
Yes.
have the link here too.
Yes. Yes. And I'm developing another website by Ghost Book writers, and that's going to be a promotion of the Arabic language book that's coming out. But also, it talks about a lot of things in my book and my motivation for writing it, and me as an
Yeah.
author. So that will be coming out soon as well. The website for
Ah,
my
wonderful.
book. So I'm very excited about that. And also, I work online and also in office.
Oh, yeah.
So I work on WebEx for clients who are some distance, and then personally in my office. And my office is in Oakland, New Jersey.
Gosh, and you offer so many amazing services. I was just going through them.
Yeah, I'm very proud of my services because they're very unique.
Yeah.
I have a program called Operation
Yeah.
Heal,
Yep.
and that comes from my experiences of having cesarean sections and the anesthesia didn't
Yeah.
work. So to get in the zone so you can heal with the least amount of medication and no drug addiction, and how to get through the surgery previous pre-op and then during the surgery and post-op to heal faster. So that I developed over the course of time. I also work with
Mm.
fertility consciousness. I call it metamorphosis, fertility enhancement coaching, and in many other ways, and particularly with athletes. I work with many, many teens with their athletic pursuits and also music and the performing arts. I work in all those areas as well as a peak performance
Yeah.
coach and a hypno coach, I call myself, because I use hypnosis. I teach self hypnosis.
How wonderful. I love the one that, I mean, you do stress management to overcome and conquer your
Yes,
fears. That's a
that's
great
all.
one.
That's all part of it. Yes, and the fears can come from any
Yeah.
place. They can come because you don't have confidence on, on the wrestling mat, and it may go back to a trauma you had
Right.
when you were younger. So I work with that. But it could be just fear, anxiety. You're afraid to go to school because you hear of all these school shootings. It can come in many different ways. That's why you need to be prepared and resilient
Yeah.
because you never can tell what will happen.
Thank you so much again for your contribution to healing, to health, and spirituality in our reality. Thank you so much, Christine, for your presence.
Thank you, Valerie, for the opportunity.
Thank
I
you. We'll be
appreciate
in
it.
touch again soon. Bye for now, Christine. Take good care.
Okay. Okay.
You
Have a
too.
good day
Thank
now.
you.
Bye.